Hello and welcome. There we go. No, there we go. And welcome to a very off-center episode of the Metagame. Today on the show, examples of how I've messed up. And before we get to that, though, I want to welcome you to the show here, where we have a webcam that is usually pointed at my face instead of the rest of the set and room. And we also have a bunch of topics that we're going to be discussing. Not only just me yammering at you, but me repeating what you yammer back to me in the live stream chat. Because this is how the metagame works. I'll present the topic, and then along with the live stream YouTube chat people, I'm going to take their feedback and their responses, and we'll turn this lecture into a conversation as best we can with one guy reading comments over YouTube. If you are in the YouTube live streaming audience and you want to participate, you have a question or a comment or something to contribute to the show, type it in that chat window and make sure to include the hashtag TMG in your post for the metagame, because what I'm going to do is, as the chat scrolls by as we go along, I'm going to use my web browser's search tool to search for that hashtag to highlight comments that have it, which will make it a little easier for me to find them. And it seems like YouTube's been doing some updates and changes behind the scenes to the live streaming chat system. Because last couple of weeks, as chats scroll off the top, I haven't been able to scroll up scroll my chat window up to go get them anymore. It used to be like a normal browser window where I could scroll up to find stuff that scrolled away. So if anyone's chat message scrolls off screen, you may need to repost it later. I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out a better way to accommodate that. But for now, that seems to be the current status of the YouTube chat window. All right. Also, before we get into today's topic, there are a couple of little announcements I want to share with anyone who is taking the time to join us. First of all, a reward for people who watch the show. I want to let you know that our awesome sponsor of components, board game components, Top Shelf Gamer, is currently running through the rest of the month of April. They are running a contest on their website for a $100 gift certificate. And they didn't ask me to talk about this. It's just something I noticed, and they've treated me really well. So I wanted to point people towards their site for this contest. There is a link to the Top Shelf Gamer contest for a $100 gift certificate for their web store in the description to this video. So if you find that the link is down there in the description next to the Top Shelf Gamer section in the sponsor area, follow that link, enter the contest, and hopefully it'd be awesome if a viewer of the metagame won that contest. Speaking of the metagame, the second of two announcements is in May, I posted this on Twitter and the Facebook page, but there's also a link in the description below to a Board Game Geek forum that I encourage everyone listening to go and post on, because we're going to do an experiment here. I'm going through the feedback that I received in the survey that I recently did for the Paradise and Fun Again Games contest, where I asked for suggestions to improving the channel in general and stuff like that. And I'm kind of following some of those suggestions. I'm going to be doing some experiments over the weeks to come. And in May, we're going to take the format of the metagame, and we're going to temporarily pause the metagame episodes instead of being every Friday. I'm going to try a series. I don't really quite have the name for it. Maybe it'll still just be the metagame. I don't know. But I'm going to take and try and do every weekday, we're going to do a 10-minute episode, roughly 10 minutes. It might be longer or so, but we're going to shoot for about 10-minute episodes where we're going to pick one question provided to me by the people in that Board Game Geek forum, and we're going to extrapolate and just talk about that one thing. Maybe it'll help keep the show a little more focused. We'll just see. It'll be an experiment. We'll see how it goes. So again, there is a link to the Board Game Geek forum where I'm accepting your questions and asking people to vote with the little thumbs up option they have there. And the questions or ideas for episodes that get the biggest thumbs up are going to be the ones that I use. I'm going to go completely by the thumbs up system in there. So again, link to that in the comments below. But for now, let's get to some stories and some idea. Let's get to some stories of how I have messed up when it comes to gaming, doing one of the cardinal sins of board gaming, and what we can do to not get in that situation or rectify it, or just how it's affected you. I'm talking about, of course, the cardinal sin of bailing on a game when you are board gaming at an event, whether it's a group of just your closest friends, or you're at like a big convention full of strangers, you're playing a 12-player game of something that, Panic on Wall Street. We'll take that. That's 12 minutes. That's not what's important about the story. That's the wrong detail. The right detail is simply that act of having to excuse yourself early. So I got a couple examples of how that's happened to me and what I've done. What I want to know is what has happened to make you guys have to bail on a game or excuse yourself early. How do we mitigate the damage that does to the game? And how do we just prevent that from happening in the first place? Or wherever the conversation takes us from here. So first of all, here's some examples kind of the bad situations that I have found myself in to kind of set the stage. So to kind of let you know what I'm talking about. First of all, I have talked about this horrible game of Spartacus, this 7+ players of Spartacus that I got sucked into one day. Not really, it was my first game of Spartacus, so I didn't know what to expect. And the guy who was hosting it had every print and play homemade expansion possible for the game, just bloating it with players and extra rules. And the game, I'm not exactly sure how long the game went, because the game, by the time that I had to bail, had gone on 3 bloody hours. Now, during that time, as I got closer to the point where I realized I don't think I'm going to have enough time to finish this, nor do I really want to at this point, I started considering faking an important phone call or something. Oh, my phone's ringing. I gotta go. My dog's on fire. Or going to the bathroom and never coming back, or at one point just throwing myself down a flight of stairs. What happened though eventually is, again, I did not realize the game was going to take that long. So that's part of it's my bad. And we'll talk about that too. But eventually got to the point where I hit the point where I had to leave. I was out of time, and I had to get home and take care of some chores, put my kid to bed. We were out of time. So I had to excuse myself from the game. Fortunately, the game was winding down at that point. So me leaving wasn't like I was in first place or anything. Me leaving made a very, very small impact on the people that were actually had a chance at completing the game. So learning from that, I thought, okay, I need to always find out how long a game's going to take before I start. Which takes me to my second of 3 examples, which was at a local convention here in town. And it was the first big local convention. I think there was 120 people there that I had gone to. It was like a 3-day board gaming convention. So it was pretty neat, like 3 years ago. And so to do something special for it, I hosted a game of wits and wagers. And I was going to host that at 11 a.m. And about 8:30 or so in the morning, someone came up and asked me if I wanted to play a game of Nations. It's like, oh, well, I haven't played Nations. And they assured me, oh, don't worry. It's got like an hour and a half. It's like, well, I got this Wits and Wagers game that I got started at 11, and it's 8:30 now. And the guy's like, no, if we get going on it, we can get done with this game of Nations before your Wits and Wagers game that you have to host. It's like, perfect. Let's do it. So we sat down, and he started teaching the game. And the gentleman started teaching the game by cracking open the rule book and starting to read through and methodically explain what was going on. Now, he was going through, and it wasn't like he was just sitting there dryly reading the rule book in a monotone voice. He had played the game before and was using that as a guide. Long story short, though, or short story long, the portion of just instructing everyone how to play the game took like an hour and 15 minutes. So there we are, nearly 10 a.m. I'm at the point where now we can start playing the game. There's no way I was going to be able to play this game of Nations and still be able to get in my game of Wits and Wagers. So I felt horrible, but I said, you know what? Thank you for teaching the game, but I have this other obligation that I mentioned. I got to bail and I got to go. What was nice about that is that we had not actually started playing the game. What was even nicer about that is as I was getting up, feeling guilty, I was leaving, changing the player count. Someone just randomly walking by was like, "Ooh, Nations." And they're like, "Oh, we have a seat." He jumped right in and took my seat. He already knew how to play. And so it didn't impact the game at all. But I still, honestly, I felt guilty about it. So that's why I, personally speaking, to mitigate bailing, now I've kind of, to try and prevent that from happening, before I get into a game, it's like, okay, I want to know when we're going to start, and I want to make it upfront when my hard stop is, when I'm going to have to leave. And for example, there is a gaming event thing, a little get together planned for this Sunday, and it's going to go from 2 to 7 p.m. And I have told the host that I have a 7 p.m. hard stop. So no matter what we're playing, 7 p.m., I'm going to have to just get up and abruptly leave. And by setting the expectations this far in advance, I'm hoping that if we do hit that hard stop, it's not going to be a problem because we can kind of change what we play as we get closer to that time period. And we'll know it's coming in advance. So again, I think what it really boils down to is setting expectations. And not just as the player, but also as the host. Setting the expectations of length of time, what to expect, and if you have a hard stop, and how that's going to affect your ability to continue the rest of the game or not. And of course, there are other outside factors, such as the venue that you're in closing. Nothing you can do about that. Or emergencies that come up, because emergencies are going to come up. And if there is an emergency, I would hope that everyone playing realizes that that has to take precedence. But if you're just stuck in a 3-hour plus game of Spartacus and you're contemplating throwing yourself down a flight of stairs, that doesn't necessarily constitute an emergency. That just constitutes a series of very poor decisions. So that's my series of very poor decisions and how I've been mitigating those. Let's go now over to the chat to find out how you guys have experienced this, any questions you have about it, or your own experiences, or any general other whatnot. So let me open up my little chat window here. Scroll upwards as far as I can, which looks like I am currently almost at the top, which is good. That's awesome time. All right. It looks like the farthest up I can get is a comment by the user known as Toyota Wolf, who mentions that in his game group, says Toyota, we had a guy who always had to bail an hour early each time we played. And each time thank you, YouTube chat. A guy who always had to bail an hour early each time we played board games that have so much, he eventually gained the nickname Early. It's kind of a very strange nickname, but makes sense in this case. So in this case, it sounds like it was a repeated offense, for lack of a better word, a repeated offense. So Toyota, I want to know, if we come back to this in the chat, how frequently did he, well, he said he always had to bail, but how did his constant bailing eventually change your willingness to play with him? Did it affect it at all? Was it something you just grinned and bared it? Or did it actually cause him to be invited to play with you less? I want to know what kind of impact it had. Okay, so let's continue on with Homemaker Hobbies, who says to us, Homemaker Hobbies, we haven't ever had to leave a game early. I have been pushed almost to the point of rage quitting due to disrespectful comments. Needless to say, he hasn't been invited back to our home since. Well, here is a other side of the coin. This is something totally unexpected. And if I had like a big alarm siren buzzer to have go off, I would ring that right now because we have kind of a switcheroo here. We have the other side of the coin. So this is a case of someone not bailing, but basically be wanting that person to leave. Boy, what a horrible situation to be the person that makes themselves that person. So like you already mentioned, that's someone that you haven't invited back to your home since. And the reason why was because of disrespectful comments. So since that is the other side of the coin, I'm wondering, I'm trying to like a puzzle piece in a jigsaw puzzle. I'm trying to fit this in to the topic, and I'm trying not to go off on a completely different tangent about that scenario. But so I want to know, actually, taking this premise, not necessarily you, Homemaker Hobbies, but anyone else, that is an interesting premise. All of my examples that I gave were related to the game itself. But yeah, let's talk about the players. You're in a game where you are encountering a terrible, horrible player. Do you excuse yourself from it and bail on it just because of other players? Or do you smile and grin, and then as soon as it's over, boom, you're out of there. You know you're never going to play with that guy again. Kind of a sad, but I think valid aspect of the conversation there. So let's keep that in mind. And I'm curious to know if anyone else has actually had to deal with those other players that have made them want to bail and how you've handled that. Toyota also mentions, this is off topic, he says, but I think Chaz should do or take a shelfie. Don't threaten me. Oh wait, a shelfie. Yes, sorry. I was thinking something else. Sure. I'm sure I have a few floating around out there already, but remind me in the YouTube comments or something, and perhaps we could. Better question. Why? Is there a shelfie thing that's going around right now that I'm supposed to know of? Some cool shelfie thing? I'll let you respond and let me know and boss me around further. Dan Hughes joins us. Hey, Dan. Dan is going to say, I left a game before it started recently, as the person teaching it was trying to do so by reading directly from the rule book, which he had not read before. Nope, not doing it. That is super frustrating. And you know what? Not only frustrating for the players, but also frustrating for the person that's trying to teach the game too, I think, because that does add a lot of pressure. And sometimes there's no way to avoid it. If you're in a group and you find a new game that y'all want to play, it's a necessary evil. It's something I try to avoid, not very well. I find myself having to resort to the rulebook often. So I can tell you from personal experience, the only thing worse than a person trying to teach a game by reading it directly from the rulebook without having read it before is someone trying to host a live YouTube show by reading the comments directly from the chat without having read them before. That is the worst. But so Dan, I can commiserate with you in that respect very much. That would stink. Kabuki Kid joins us with this comment to say, thoughtful pause. Thoughtful pause, and I ruin your comment right off the bat. If someone has to bail, I hope it would be for a cooperative game, since that shouldn't hurt that much. For that is true. Game type may have something to do with the impact that bailing would have. However, I'm going to put the glove on the other foot here and say, I would think a cooperative game could potentially be just as damaging. What if the player who's bailing is someone who has a player power that you need to win the game? Then again, thoughtful pause. I would assume if it is a cooperative game, it increases the likelihood that another player who's still there could take over and play two characters or whatever. Take over their character and play the rest. So if necessary, you guys could absorb the player that way. So that's a good point. The game type probably can help lessen the blow from someone having to bail early. So that's a good point. Very good point. A point I think is deserving of a thoughtful pause as we ponder its applicability. Is that a word? Applicability? Yes. All right, let's continue on to Trevin, who's going to get me out of this quagmire that I've created for myself with that last comment by letting us know that most game walkouts that I'm familiar with have to do with time. A game says that it takes an hour. 2 hours later, it still isn't over. That's a good point, Trevin. And I think that is something that we can all agree on, is that board game boxes lie to us. They say a game is going to take X amount of time, and often that amount of time is under the best case scenario circumstances. Lying box. So that's another vote for just kind of the time. And that is a good point. That's something that I had not touched on yet, or I haven't thought of at all when I was writing my notes, is that using how much do we want to use the time that's written on the box as a gauge for how long this game is going to take? Because it can often be completely misleading, and it could be kind of often the best case scenario. So how much time do we want to add? Does anyone out there have a rule of thumb that they use for, like, when I look at a game box time, I usually take, I assume 150% of what the game box says as the minimum. And so does anyone else do that? And what kind of mathematical formulation do you apply to those games, times on the game box? Let me know everywhere that you can, including the comments below. Toyota posts again and says, I don't usually bail on games, but one thing that I have done, secrets about Toyota Wolf. One thing I have done is when the game becomes unfun, I have done things to shorten the game, like playing pointlessly and cutting off routes in Ticket to Ride, or just getting myself killed off so I can leave and dropping my guard. Now that is a temptation that I think we have all experienced, Mr. Wolf. But I think the game you are playing, not the Ticket to Ride one, the game within a game. Oh, if only there was some phrase for a game within a game or a game about gaming. Oh, I'm sure it'll come to me. That tactic is a very dangerous one, I believe, because it could lead to at least the perception of king-making, or ruining the game for others. They're here. If everyone else is emotionally invested in the game, and someone starts just not caring anymore, that can really ruin the good time of everyone else. It can be seen as a selfish endeavor in a way. But I know I have, and I can't speak for anyone else, but I'm assuming it's universal, but I know firsthand that I have also experienced that exact same thing that you described, where after a while you're like, I'm done here. When can this end? And trying to figure out, how can I still be polite and courteous to the other players? Well, while mentally, like it or not, I have checked out of this game. So that is something I think is a very delicate situation. That may be something that is a topic for a completely dedicated episode. How do you gracefully exit a game that you have mentally checked out of? That's a good one, though. And I think that's really some mind candy to chew on right there. Dan mentions again, Shadows over Camelot is a great game for allowing people to bail mid-game. That is true. And Shadows over Camelot, doesn't it bill itself as a game where people can even pop in mid-game very easily? I can't think of any other game that seems to have that aspect of it mentioned so often, that people can pop out and pop in, and really not affect the gameplay. Yep, that was not a thoughtful pause. I was trying to think of another game like that, and I could not. So that's true. Shadows over Camelot, if you're hitting that hard stop point for yourself, might be a good one or something else that allows that, finding games that do allow the pop in and the pop out. Specifically finding one of those games when you're starting to run out of time. That's a very good tip, Dan. And I wish I could think of more games, though. I'm sure more of them will come to me and the people in the comments. But until then, we'll continue on with Toyota Wolf again, who says to us, I have had to kick someone out because they started to get into insults and screaming at each other. Thank you, Star Wars Armada, and your so unclear rules. X-Wing is a good game that does this for you, too. Yikes. Insults and screaming at each other. Conflict resolution is something that I am personally not good at. And in the events that I have hosted, I have been very grateful that I've only had once or twice that I've had to actually kind of speak to someone about their behavior, but it's never been because of insults or screaming at each other. Now, there is, of course, a difference between a little bit of friendly smack talk between friends and being insulting. So I'm curious, Toyota, or anyone else that has experienced this, where do we draw the line? Where does something go from friendly ribbing to outright insults? Do we as gamers know where that line is and prevent ourselves from crossing over it? Is it just the way that's communicated, like raising your voice or not? Is it the content of the message? Or is it how well the players know each other that gives some leniency, some latitude to just how far they can push those boundaries? If you have an example, let me know the example, because I want more details on that, just out of my own curiosity. In the meantime, though, we're going to continue on to Equip Kilt. It's been a while since we've seen Equip Kilt's icon, avatar, and message come by, and so we're going to find out that Equip Kilt is here to say, funny enough, I have helped players bail out of games who needed to leave. This would usually involve some creative rules tweaking to make sense of why we were down a player. Well, that's cool. That is a neat aspect of this. Actually working them having to bail into the thematic experience of the game that you're playing. I think that's kind of cool. Of course, not every single game is going to allow that sort of ability, but when possible, I think that is a neat kind of way you can kind of shape that particular game instance as well. It might actually lend itself to kind of a story for that. For example, if I was playing Cry Havoc and someone had to leave, you could come up with lots of different reasons. They got called off planet, they had some plague hit them, and maybe even the spaces they were in are going to be quarantined for a round or two as the plague goes into quarantine and dies off. There's actually, it's neat. I like that Equip Kilt, because the more I'm talking about it aimlessly, the more I realize that having someone bail while still a bad situation could be an opportunity to introduce a new twist on the game that you're playing to make it more of a unique story-driven experience. And games where you have a story that you take away afterwards, even making lemonade out of lemons, that can be a really good approach. I'm going to keep that in mind myself, Equip Kilt, next time I'm in this situation, and we'll see how that works out. So thank you for the awesome comment there. Right next to Equip Kilt's comment is another frequent guest of the show who has not been able to join us for a while, but is back to say something to us, and that is Round to It. And Round to It posts in text form the following. It says, I ran a game of Escape, Zombie City, and one new player sat through the rules but broke down 15 seconds into starting the game. He stepped away abruptly with, I can't do this, and I took his spot. I am not familiar enough with Escape Zombie City to know if it was the content of the game. Was it the theme and the content? Is it a very adult theme, very mature theme? Is it graphic? and was it that he couldn't deal with the art and the concepts of the game, or was it just that he thought the game was incredibly boring and didn't want to get into it? Did you ever find out? Don't leave me hanging here, round to it. What led to such a strange behavior? If you know, let me know, because I'm curious to know what led to it, because that might help others prevent that situation in the future. That's one I haven't experienced myself, though. Benjamin joins us to say, I haven't really had this happen too much while board gaming, but I've seen it a ton while playing RPGs. I've had people just stand up in the middle of a session and say, well, I gotta go. That's frustrating, to say the least. Yes, RPGs, again, that's a whole nother path that we could travel down there. The closest I've come to that when playing an RPG was, it actually wasn't during, it was, oh my goodness. It was one of I think I've mentioned before on the show that my role-playing experiences playing D&D have never been the best experience. There's always been something when I've played D&D that has left me flummoxed, at least. The closest thing I've gotten to that, someone bailing during a game of D&D, was actually at the end of the game. People were divvying up the loot and whatnot, so the game was winding down. But one player, I'd never played with this group before, so it was my first introduction to them anyway. But one player basically didn't get the item or something he wanted and basically said, well, I'm not going to play this character anymore. I slit my own throat. And it's like, what? And then everyone else is like, okay. So that actually has become a running gag with my wife and I when someone gives up really quickly. This is hard. I slit my own throat. But so that's the closest thing to bailing on an RPG that I've experienced. I have not experienced someone just standing up saying, I'm out. Thankfully that didn't happen, but I can understand that being very, very frustrating. Sheesh. All right. Next comment here we will have is coming from, here it is. The chat moved on me. Trevin says, if someone has a quote unquote hard stop time trying to play a longer game quickly, no, that just never works. Just give up on playing the longer game and play something shorter. Play that game next time. That's excellent, wise advice, Trevin. And I think that is something to keep in mind and implement. Just to play devil's advocate, I'm surprised how often it seems that switching to a shorter game and keeping the longer one for later just either doesn't come up as an option when you're right there in the moment, or for some reason just doesn't happen. Maybe that's just me. But I think it's excellent advice, though. I think it's something, though, in my own personal experience, has been harder to actually do than say. I don't know. Let me know out there, people, if you've experienced the same. The heat of the moment, you want to play X. Even if we can only play 2 rounds, we'll do that. And you're right. It never works. Rarely works. It works sometimes. But it's not working right now for the sake of this conversation. So let me know the response to that. Anyway. Toyota, we're now at the point of the comments where people are starting to follow up on the original things that they said. And Toyota comes back to talk about the guy who is nicknamed Early. He says, Early. He eventually ended up just not coming anymore and had to bow out from gaming altogether. His wife wanted him home. Oh, and the reason he got early is because his excuse was always his wife wanted him home early. That's understandable. In the respect that it makes sense. I know that when I set my own hard stop for times, it is, for me, actually is my wife and daughter, basically family obligations, getting ready for stuff. So it all depends, I believe, on the way that you handle the situation. There's a difference between saying, hey, I'm going to have these other obligations. I got to go do it this time. Just want to let you know. And being in the middle of something and just go, I'm out, and walking off. So I guess it really does depend on how the person handles the situation. Christian joins us to say, We had a guy once who didn't say anything when we were playing Panamax, and the chat scrolled away, when we were playing Panamax until the last round, when he stood up and told us his train is leaving, and then he was gone. Now, that stinks, but I wonder if you would have not minded as much if instead of a train, he was taking a boat. Maybe you were playing, on an island or something, and if he had had to leave by boat, the irony of that would have just been so wonderful. I myself would not have minded at all. But as a train, no, that's just disgusting. Waiting till the last round and standing up and leaving. Okay, Christian also mentions, I don't mind people if they leave, if they say so at the start of the game or for an emergency. I agree. And like I said, I think it's all about setting expectations as the player and the host. Comments are starting to scroll away, so I'm going to kick it in high gear here for a couple of minutes to catch the ones that are about to scroll off screen. Kabuki says, I grin and bear it when dealing with a terrible person in a game. Well, thankfully, I have barely had to deal with that, though. I just make it through, and I never play with them again. Easy solution. I'm curious, one other follow-up question on that then, Kabuki. How large is the group then that you are dealing with? Because oftentimes when I'm hosting an event, there'll be like 8 to 12 people. So it's really difficult sometimes to avoid the problem person. You end up, especially if you're hosting and you don't want someone to fill out. How do you deal with it when there's just not enough games to go around and you get stuck with the person? That's, I want to know how you've dealt with that, because I usually, again, I end up grinning and bearing it, but then ending up not having a good time. So let me know about that if your situation is similar or not. Again, kicking into high gear, so let's continue. Trevin says, if you have a hard stop, you should say your out is in 30 minutes or so before it actually is. That way, if the game goes over, you don't have to ruin the other's time. I agree. And I want to just clarify, not only 30 minutes or so before it hits, but also before the game even starts as well. If you have a hard stop, don't have 30 minutes or so before your hard stop be the first time that you mention it. Mention it as early as possible. Toyota says, I have bailed before games start based on who is playing, body odor, and noise level. Oh, so here Toyota has the full sensory experience of bailing on games. Yeah, audio reasons, olfactory reasons, interpersonal reasons. You're right though. It can be more than just someone being insulting. I have sat next to someone who I desperately wished would get up from the table and go brush their teeth. And then after an hour and a half of that, almost felt so sick that I had to go home. So yeah, you're right, Toyota. There could be many a reason why someone might want to bail on a game. Kabuki says, Kabuki talking about co-op games. Yes, it's easier to just absorb their role, as you put it, in a co-op game. So that's kind of reinforcing what we're talking about there. All right. I'm gonna blast through a few comments here because I see a few I want to get to down the road as well from newer people. But let's first just chop through some more comments from Trevin first, who says, if you have a new game that you want to play, read the rules and learn it ahead of time. With resources like YouTube, you really have no excuse. I'll play a dummy game by myself if needed. Quick side note, Trevin, I agree with you whenever possible. That is a good thing to do. And my side note is, I have found when I take the time to sit down beforehand and play a dummy game by myself, that lends itself to the best teaching experiences when I eventually teach the game. Playing a few dummy rounds. I highly recommend that as a strategy for anyone who wants to teach a game. That is what works best for me. Now you know. Oh, I made everything bounce. Sorry. Toyota says, regarding the shelfie. Oh, here we go. A little aside here. Regarding the shelfie. Shelfies are interesting to see how folks organize or manage their collections and see if they try to cram expansions into main boxes and if games are still in cellophane. It's fun. Yeah, I admit it. You're right. It is fun. I can't tell you how many videos of someone standing in front of their game shelves. I spend just as much time examining their game shelves behind them as I do actually listening to what they're saying, because you're right. And you're right. And they've given me a couple ideas there for some other things to do video wise with everyone. So anyway, like this is an aside. So let's get back to the main topic there. But I agree. Kabuki says, as a general rule, not an admiral rule or even a corporal rule, but a general rule, always add 30 minutes to the longest time on a box when assuming how long the game is going to take to play. Yep, I agree. 30 minutes minimum. And if you have to teach the game, all bets are off. Toyota says that he doubles or triples the time on the boxes for the first plays. Yeah, like I said, all bets are off when it's someone's first game and you're teaching it. Yeah, doubling or tripling the play time on the box. Yeah, I don't think that's unreasonable. I think that's that can happen. My very first game of Eldritch Horror, I think we played 6 people. It was a 7-hour game of Eldritch Horror. And there was no one really suffering from AP. Maybe one person was a little slow in their turns, but we were figuring out how everything worked. So it was not a model of efficiency while we played. So yeah, doubling, tripling the time on the box for first plays especially, absolutely. Christian mentions, if I am on a schedule, I say so at the start. Even if that window is 8 hours and we start a game of Codenames. I think that is a very wise approach to it. If I was on a 4-hour schedule, 5, even 6-hour schedule, I would have been glad that I had announced that before that game of Eldritch Horror, because we wouldn't have been able to finish it. Very good point. So here we have a comment from Billy, who I believe has joined us before periodically and joins us again. Billy says, I've had to leave a game only one time. I warned them at the start that I had to leave at 9 p.m., but I was assured that I could be taught and we would finish Dead of Winter in the 90 minutes that I had left. Then Billy adds LOL in all caps, which makes me assume that finishing of Dead of Winter in 90 minutes that you had left did not happen. Dead of Winter, now that brings up another thing. Speaking of like co-op games and different type of games, Dead of Winter is one of those games, through its kind of social atmosphere, really can vary on the length of time. You could play the same scenario with just maybe even sometimes the same people. And depending on the story that develops and the way people, everything that happens as people are playing together can vastly change the amount of bartering or accusations and storytelling that happens. So that's a very good point. First, I'm sorry that your Dead of Winter game got kind of ruined in that way. That always stinks. But I think it's also important to realize that the type of game like that definitely will also be a factor. Not only if it's a first game or being taught, but also the type of game is going to be a very major factor in the amount of time that it ends up taking. Kabuki says, if it is a big game group, okay, if it's a big game group, I think this is referring to when you have trouble people that make you want to bail and trying to limit your exposure to them. If it's a big game group, there is also a possible option of having somebody hop into your seat and take over your role if they know the game. Okay, that wasn't about the other thing. That was just about bailing in general. So that is true. If you have 20, 30 people around, or maybe less than that, just depends who's available, you're right, it does increase that possibility. Of course, that's also going to be an abrupt change. Someone coming into a game 75% of the way through isn't going to know the strategy you were employing, the game state necessarily. So while it can be a band-aid for that situation, certainly, I think it's still going to degrade the game playing experience. Not as bad, obviously, potentially, maybe, I don't know, possibly, as, maybe not, of the person just leaving completely. It really, I think, I don't know, personally, I think it could be a mixed bag. That new person coming in, depending on how well they know the game and the game state, and the person that they are replacing, it could be a jarring experience, though. But, okay, yeah, I'm still going to lead on, I think it would be better than the person just bailing completely. So, okay. Before the comment roll scrolls away, I want to get to Stefan's comment. Stefan says, if games take overly long or are really boring, I have suggested faster victory conditions or fewer number of rounds, and that often helps. That is a really good point. An example of that, a game I find really easy to modify the number of rounds is a game called Bootleggers. Really enjoy this game. I played it just a couple of weeks ago. And Bootleggers is nice because you have the certain number of rounds, and the game normally plays 12 rounds. But even in the instructions, I believe it says, you could play 8. And the difference between 8 and 12 rounds, there's not really, at some point in the game, new things are being introduced, and policemen come in round 5 and start affecting players who are in the lead as a catch-up mechanic, and stuff happens. But by round 8, you're kind of in the end game, and between 8 and 12, nothing new gets introduced. So when I introduce Bootleggers to new people, I say, hey, we can play this as an 8-round game, and when we get to round 6, if everybody is into it, we can take a vote and see if we want to extend it to the full 12. And that way, it kind of sets the expectations that this is going to be only an 8-round game, but if you're really having fun, we can extend it, but we don't have to. And it lets people kind of gauge and lets them get out if they find the game really boring. So finding games like that, I think that's a really good approach. Faster victory conditions or fewer number of rounds. I think those are excellent, excellent tips, Stefan. Thank you so much for contributing them to the programming. Okay. Oh, Kabuki mentions, in addition to Shadows over Camelot, Codenames is a game where people can join and leave very easily, even mid-game. That's true. Codenames is Codenames is an excellent example of that. In fact, I would go so far as to argue my point vehemently that Codenames is an easier game for people to join and leave than Shadows over Camelot. I'm thinking Codenames should take the new title as game easiest to have people come and go. That is my opinion, and I'll let you guys have a thoughtful pause as you stew on that. Yeah? All right. Next, we have a comment from Christian, who says, Codenames was just an example of a game that's a lot shorter and should never last 8 hours. You've never played Codenames with my group. Yes, Codenames should never last 8 hours. No, my group doesn't play a long time with Codenames. No, I know what you're saying there, and I see. Yeah, Codenames is an excellent example of a game that should be short, and I think it's also one that, like you said, like we just said, it's easier for people to pop in and out. It lends itself to being kind of a wrap up. I'm running out of time. It's a good choice for a game for that, definitely. All right, JD joins us to say, on the flip side, any thoughts on how the I'm going to think 5 million ply down optimizer who does more or less forces someone else to bail? I may have misread that comment. On the flip side, any thoughts on how the, quote, I'm going to think 5 million ply down, PLY, that might be an if it's abbreviation, I'm missing it. My mind has chewed up and crumpled up your comment like a piece of notebook paper. I apologize. Basically, I'm going to try to think 5 million and an optimizer who more or less forces someone else to bail. I'm thinking essentially, JD, your comments, the purpose of your comment was basically the person who bogs down the game with the way they want to approach playing it, that basically causes everyone else to be upset because they're trying to basically turn the game into something it's not, or turn their play style into something that's not intended. That is, if so, that is definitely can be a a source of frustration. And if I misinterpreted that, let me know in the comments below, and I will revisit the comment, because I think my mind garbled something in there, and I apologize for ruining your comment experience. I take full ownership of smashing that opportunity to read your comment, like so much dried fish. Okay, but let's continue on with Sacha, who joins us to say, running out of time is a valid reason to bail, but we rarely run into that problem. Knowing how much time we have and selecting the right game to play usually does help prevent timing issues. For us, it works well. So there you go. This is one of those problems where fortunately there is usually a very simple solution to it. And that's awesome. That is fantastico even. Round to it mentions, we've had people drop in and out of Carcassonne. I think that it works well because the strategy is based on the state of the game on any given turn and not super nuanced and build up from the beginning. Carcassonne. Well, that's an interesting one. I can see that happening with Carcassonne. You're right, because it's so the game state changes each time and you have to kind of re-examine it each round. So I hadn't thought of the Carcassonne. That's a really good one. Thank you. And next, Toyota takes us back to the topic about Escape from Zombie City, where the guy 5 seconds into it said, "I can't do this," and left. Toyota says Escape from Zombie City is a real-time dice rolling to escape the city game. So perhaps he just wasn't into the concept of the dice rolling, simultaneous dice rolling. Okay, that helps kind of fill in some of those gaps there. Oh, and Kabuki asks, isn't it just like Escape, Curse of the Temple? Oh, that one. Okay, Escape. It's like Escape, Curse of the Temple. And Toyota says, yes, it is similar. Okay, so Escape, Zombie City. Okay, I know what game you're talking about now. You know, interesting thing about Escape, Curse of the Temple. My daughter, when she was a year ago, so about like 9 years old, we played Escape, Curse of the Temple as a family. And after the game was over, she looked at me and said, "Dad, that was the most stressful 10 minutes of my entire life." So I can see how a simultaneous dice rolling game based on the Escape engine could be something that is stressful to certain people. So thank you for elaborating on that. I'm glad that we got to do that elaboration. And Sacha mentioned something, the evil twin of bailing early, which I think is a really good thing to mention. Sacha mentions the bigger problem is when people show up late. That really screws up the whole timetable. Boy, howdy, that is true. And because do we start playing? It's depending how big your group is. It can definitely affect the group. If it's like 4 people and you're waiting on your 4th person and you can't play the game you want to play, that's one thing. Yeah, that's, like I said, that is like the evil twin of bailing early, is showing up late. And that is something that is really difficult to work around sometimes as well. Sometimes no matter how much advanced planning you have. We're down to like 5 minutes already. Wow. So let's go enter the lightning round mode, where I'm going to try and get through as many comments as I can, just to give more comments a chance to shine, have their moment to shine. Toyota says, I second Sasha's comment that people showing up late really screws up things more, and it happens more often than leaving early. I agree with you on both points there. It does seem to happen more often, doesn't it? One thing I have done is there have been certain people or certain game groups where if we want to start playing at at like 2 p.m., I'll say we're going to start at 1 p.m., knowing that we're actually going to start at 2. I mean, if we start early, everyone's there. That's awesome. But actually telling them to come, giving them an earlier time, knowing they're going to be late, that actually has helped. Not to try and trick them or be mean, but that can be a way to help. Anyway, lightning round. JD also mentions a question, and he says, do you find downtime heavy games promote bailing, or is it just more raw time constraints that cause the bailing? Oh my goodness! That is an awesome question. No, I personally don't find downtime heavy games promoting more bailing. To me, it is usually more just the time constraints. What I do find downtime heavy games promoting is people lose interest, start playing with their phones, just lose interest in the game and start playing really poorly and mentally check out. That's what I see downtime heavy games promoting more than bailing. So maybe not bailing physically, but bailing mentally on the game. And that sometimes can be just as, if not more, disruptive. Dan Hughes says, people arriving late is the bane of my life as a large game group organizer. Oh, tell me about it, Dan. Yeah, when I would host a gaming club that had between 12 to 15 people that would show up, and 3 of those people straggle in after everyone gets started over the course of the next hour and a half, it is, you're right, the absolute bane of the game organizer's life. Perhaps we need a whole episode on how to mitigate people showing up late. That's a really good topic idea. Rusted Beetle mentions, we were playing AEG's world's largest dungeon, and we're about at level 8 when we showed up at one of the players' houses on one weekend, and the house was empty. The player had moved and didn't let us know. All right, I gotta be honest here. As much as bailing on a game stinks, if you are going to bail on a game, that right there has to be an example of the most epic bail that you can do. You got to kind of respect someone for putting that much effort into bailing on the game. So that kind of stinks, but in a way, kind of proud of the guy for committing that much effort to the bail. So that's quite a story there. All right, let's see how many we can get to now. Let's continue on to Trevin, who says, I've tried to play viticulture with my group at least 4 or 5 times, and we never get to it. They try and do it at the end of the gaming evening, but I know that it's going to take too long, so I switch to something else. Oh, Trevor, I have a whole little shelf, a little section on my shelves, basically, that I could fill with games that are in the same boat. They never get to, you bring them and they always get turned down or passed up, or you run out of time. So you're not alone there, Trevin. You're not alone in that. Billy mentions, comma, I haven't had to leave a game, but a couple of times there has been family drama at the house that I was playing at. Ooh, husband and wife arguing, etc. And as soon as the game was over, I was gone. I cannot blame you, Billy. That situation can be so uncomfortable, so bad. Yeah, that's actually a question. Is there a situation or type of situations in which bailing is completely justified? So one aspect of this conversation that we didn't really touch on. And I would say that yes, there are situations in which bailing would be completely justified. Even if at the moment make people upset, it may be the wise decision in the long run. Kabuki, I'm going to go through 4 more comments here and then we're out of time. Kabuki says, I avoid this, going back to the dealing with the difficult people that make you want to bail. Kabuki says, I avoid them no matter what. I'll leave early if necessary even. Thankfully, the terrible people tend not to stick. So that saves me from dealing with them over a long period of time. Well, that's good. However, in those situations, again, I'm not there. I don't know the situation, but I always worry, do the people like that not stick because of an environment that gets fostered where people don't want them to stick? Or is it just that they don't like the hobby or whatever? Is it cause or effect? Is what I'm trying to say. And that's something that always makes me kind of wonder about those situations and prevents me from going, whew, they're gone, thank goodness. But again, that just might be my own baggage. Let's continue on, though, with those comments I said I wanted to get to. I'm wondering if anyone else feels that way or has experienced that one way or the other. Let me know, because that would be interesting to know. But in the meantime, JD confesses that we keep, quote unquote, the cube of shame, a DGT 6-sided game timer, as a good-natured prod to move games along if it starts getting too long. So there you go. There you have an actual visual aid on the table available as a hint, which actually may be a good idea. That's a good one. That actually, like I said, may be a good idea. Gil, we're going to wrap up here with Gil, who has a couple of comments, and he mentions, sometimes the person teaching takes so long or keeps stopping to check the rules, and I've already said that I need to leave in 2 hours. If I'm at a table that everyone is spending time on their phones between the turns and keeps asking, is it my turn? Where was I? I just say I get to leave since we're not here to play. And there you go. That might be one of those situations in which bailing may be justified. If everyone's checking their phones and doing something else. I'm not encouraging bailing in that situation. I'm just wondering out loud if that is something in which the bail is justified. So there you go. I want to thank everybody for joining me for this topic. This is really great. Remember, like I mentioned at the top of the show, there is the contest from Top Shelf Gamer that's going on through the rest of April. Link in the description below, and also in the description below is a link to the Board Game Geek forum, where I want your suggestions, ideas for topics for the 10-minute topics series that we're going to try and do throughout the month of May. Send me your topics and vote on the ones that are already there that you like. In the meantime, I have been Chaz Marler, and along with the YouTube chat, we have been playing I'm out.